If you want to get the maximum amount of profit from a website, you need to get as much traffic as you can. If you want to get the maximum amount of traffic to your website, you need to get to the top of Google. And if you want to get to the top of Google, you need SEO, or search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is the process of optimizing a website so that Google will be more likely to index it and ensure that it ranks highly for the most relevant keywords and phrases. For example, if you have a website that sells hats, then you might try to get it to rank for the phrase buy hats online. To do this, you will go through an optimization process that would involve both on site and off site strategies. With any luck, you would eventually be able to get your website to the top of the SERPs, that's the search engine results pages, for that term, and thereby attract a huge amount of traffic. More importantly, that traffic would not just be from random visitors, but would instead be from specific people who are looking for hats. Better yet, those people will be looking for hats at the very point they came to your website. Why else would they search for hats? Which means they're ready to buy, and it should only take a small push to get them to make that decision. SEO can be a slow-going process, but it's still possible to climb the ranks and get your website to a point where it will start getting more and more organic traffic from searches. SEO essentially works by attempting to second-guess the algorithms used by Google to decide which sites to index and where to rank them. Google works by using bots, an index, and an algorithm. The bots, also known as robots or spiders, are small pieces of code designed to head out onto the web and look for content. They read web pages and they add that content to a massive index which Google can use as a reference. From there, Google will then use an algorithm to identify which content in that index is relevant to which search and which is offering value to the end user. Ultimately, the aim of Google is to help people find interesting content that will be relevant to what they're looking for. This involves a lot of factors, and the algorithm will look at how many links the content has, how visitors behave on that website, and the use of key phrases within the content. If a word or phrase is repeated often enough, then it is possible to deduce that said word or phrase is likely to be the subject matter, and thus should come up in searches for matching terms. SEO basically works by predicting and guessing how the algorithm works, because no one can be completely sure, and then using that information in order to engineer your website to get the maximum number of hits. It means gaming the system, and this in turn can allow you to trick Google into believing that your site should be number one. Of course, it's not quite that simple though, and actually, as we dig deeper, we'll see there are other more efficient ways of looking at SEO. Apart from anything else, Google is constantly updating its algorithms, usually with words beginning with P like penguin, panda, and pigeon, and that means second guessing Google can get you into trouble. Being effective at SEO means having an up to date understanding of how it works and knowing the core principles that underpin the different strategies. That's where this video series comes in. Keep watching and you'll learn which old, outdated strategies you need to avoid, how to work with Google to get the very best results, and how to future-proof your site for upcoming changes. This is the modern guide to SEO for modern marketers and site owners. This is your SEO Bible and your key to unlocking incredible success on the web. We're going to start this series with a little history lesson. Why? Because understanding how SEO used to work, how it has progressed, and what you now need to avoid is a very good way of creating context and helping you to understand what SEO means today. When SEO was first born, Google's algorithm was a lot simpler and manipulating it to your own ends was a lot easier as a result. Back then, Google looked at two key factors in determining its rankings. Those factors were keyword density and links profile. Your links profile, also called your backlinks profile, is essentially determined by how many links you have pointing to your website coming from other sites. This serves two important roles. Firstly, links help Google's robots to find your website. Bots crawl the web by reading content and following links from one site to another. If you have a link on a site that Google has already indexed, then this will allow it to find yours and add it to the network. At the same time, Google views links as testimony, assuming that a website would only link to another website if it thought said website was good and had something valuable to offer its users. Google would also assume that if you have links from 20 websites about hats, then your site is probably going to be about hats as well, especially if the anchor text has your search phrase in it. The other factor was keyword density. Keyword density meant how many times your website would repeat the words that you were trying to rank for. The more content you had and the more often you repeated the same phrase throughout that content, the more likely you would ultimately be to get ranked for that search term and to show up high in the SERPs. Of course, it was also important to research the keywords and to make sure they were actually being searched for. For this, marketers could use Google's keyword research tool in order to check the volume of searches and to get an idea about how much competition there was. A savvy optimizer would then be able to look at terms with the highest search volumes and lowest amount of competition and then try to rank for those phrases specifically. This simple algorithm makes a lot of sense in theory and should have helped Google to find content that people will be looking for quickly and easily. It would read the content in order to see which site was the most relevant for that term, and it would look at which sites had the most links from other websites. But the problem was, people eventually cottoned on to the way this worked and began to take advantage of it. Search engine optimizers realized that all they had to do to get to the top of Google was to create as many links and as much content, with keywords, as possible. So webmasters began to spam link directories and content farms, submitting their links everywhere they possibly could. They began to pay other content creators to place links on their pages, and they would also trade links. Most websites ended up with a massive list of links somewhere on one of their pages, and these would just be other random sites that had contacted them and asked to exchange links. Worse was what started to happen to content. In a bid to create as much content as possible and to use the keywords as often as possible, creators began to churn out content in huge quantities while giving no regard to quality. They also began using keyword stuffing, which essentially means repeating keywords over and over again, even when it doesn't make any sense. A typical website from the early 2000s might read, "Are you looking to buy hats online? Then you have come to the right Buy Hats Online website. This is the best place to buy hats online for anyone who wants to buy hats online, Carolina." As you can see, this content is completely nonsensical and will be highly off-putting for any real visitors looking to make a purchase. And then it got worse still. Creators began to actively steal content from other site owners and spin it in order to make it unique. Now, Google won't rank duplicate content, otherwise it would risk making every search result identical. So content spinning, as it came to be called, essentially means that you're taking an article or a blog post and using software in order to exchange many of the words for synonyms. So a sentence that read, "These are the softest, warmest and most attractive hats on the net," would become, "These are the most comfortable, most insulating and most beautiful hats on the web." And because the site owner didn't have to write that content themselves, this meant they could publish thousands of posts in a short space of time and bomb Google. Well, that's the theory at least. The reality is that, unfortunately, most spinners do this instead. These is the squitty-ish, hottest and very best beautiful hats on the fishing net. Again, it's just gibberish. So, by placing thousands of links on other sites, using their keywords as the anchor text, and by filling their sites with tons of useless content, website owners were able to get themselves to the top spot of Google. This system was so easy to abuse that some people could even get completely unrelated websites to the top of specific SERPs against the owner's will. You could make it so that searching for Big Idiot would bring up a picture of your friend, for example. This was called a Google bomb. Obviously, this started to make a mess of Google's results, and so Google had to adapt and get smarter. We've covered an awful lot of ground and even speculated at what the future of SEO might entail. At this point, you may be wondering where to start and how to put everything you've learned into action. So let's simplify for a moment, shall we? Here are our key takeaways. First off, Google is getting smarter to the point of becoming an AI with a lot of personal information about its users. Google is increasingly understanding what content actually means rather than just what it says. You should not try to trick Google. Work with Google to provide your users with the most relevant, well informed, and entertaining answers to their questions. Prove that you are trustworthy by connecting as closely as possible to high authority sites. Use structured data to further explain your posts. Don't keyword stuff. Write naturally using synonyms, relevant terms, and lots of nouns. Build a brand and focus on consistent quality. Post regularly and build the trust of your users with content marketing. Use guest posts and aim for the sites that have Google's trust already. Think of SEO as one small part of a much more cohesive marketing strategy. Combine excellent posts with social sharing and link bait. And finally, measure and monitor what is working and update your strategy on the fly. Another tip is to make sure you do your research and examine which terms to target before you set out. But even more important than that is to choose the right niche. This means picking a niche that has a large enough appeal to give you a big market, but at the same time, it means picking a niche that won't be too competitive for you to make any dent in. Look for subject matters that cater to a specific audience and that people can really get passionate about. And make sure that you are passionate about it too, because when you really love what you're writing about, all the high quality content, all the great connections, and all the consistency really come to the fore. Stop looking for quick wins and focus on building a trustworthy brand filled with incredible information. If you do that and you do just the smallest bit of marketing to give yourself a push, then Google's algorithm should do the rest and reward your enthusiasm.